Nasians, bro, you gotta stop with all the drip. I'm trying to draw you every chapter. Before we hop into this review of Chapter 9 of Four Nights of the Apocalypse, please leave your own thoughts on the chapter in the comment section down below. Leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Now, let's get into it. What's up, guys? I got the pencil here, and here we are to review Chapter 9 of Four Nights of the Apocalypse, the Venom Mixer. And I actually super duper uber like this chapter, because it answers questions, raises way more questions. I'm very intrigued. One, we open up, Percival, he's choking out, he's dying, he's freaking out, kinda sorta, and then he wakes up, bam, loads of energy, he yells, screams, and he gets everyone's attention basically. They all know where to go now because Percival just yells at the top of his lungs. And the great thing here is that afterwards, Nasians is like, okay, I know you're dumb, but like, why would you do that? And he was like, oh, well, I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to fix the gorge, right? And I like this. Like this one moment already made me like Percival's character a lot more. Like he is perceptive enough, and he gets the fact that Nasians was working for the sake of the gorge and not like an actual evil purpose. He's a nice guy, so he was willing to help out. I think that's really cool. Once again, I'm starting to like Percival's character a lot more, especially after this chapter. I don't know. It's just really nice and interesting to see, and it's also cool to see Nasians just be like, oh, wow. This guy's actually pretty nice, and he just downs it and then passes out himself. And then you take a look at the backstory of Nasians and both Dolores as well, and they talk about this old apothecary, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, named Ordo, and they explain he was a real nice guy. He helped out all the fairies, he found the gorge, which is a great place to live, it had so many resources and stuff like that. And then he took in a giant girl named Dolores. Now here's the thing, I'll talk about it in a second. You know what? I will talk about that in a second. And then a human baby, so this is a human, just showed up, and this human baby is Nasians. And then one day, he just disappeared. And everything in the gorge went bad, and everyone, including the fairies, just blamed him for that. Was just like, hey, this is all Nasians' fault. And they all start throwing rocks at him. They all being mean. They call him a demon child. And then Percival's like, y'all crazy. And then he just hits them all back with rocks. And then Nasians is like, don't worry. As the forest begins to die, he's like, don't worry, I got this. And he just opens his hands up and conjures a whole bunch of magic poison out of his body. So that explains his two weapons in the last chapter. It's interesting how the weapons spawned with like an energy-like texture, but this one spawns as a liquid. I'm assuming he can just make different forms of poison. So the henbane he summoned in the last chapter is like poison that manifests in a more sparking sense, and then this kind of poison he just spawns as a liquid. And he just explains that his body allows him to do some venom mixing. He's able to mix it around in his body after he consumes it and then reproduce it. So I'm wondering what the limitations to this are. Like, what if he takes in too much poison? Will he actually die, or is he literally just technically immune to poison and can just reproduce it in mass? Because I don't know, if I pop my man a couple deep dark poisons, is he gonna be able to work it out? Is he gonna be able to produce it endlessly? Like, I am very intrigued with this power, because honestly, only other poison user we really had or anything close to that was Malasula, and her poison was more like acid. So I'm actually really intrigued to see what the limits of Nasian's power are. And yeah, like everyone was saying, darn, I guess this really is the Fortnite of Pestilence, I guess, because he seems like the perfect candidate for it. So I'm just intrigued. But regardless of that, he brings the forest back to life. Everything's coming back. Sick or wounded, he's done it. And Percival asked a good question. Like, bro, you just saved an entire forest. Why do you call it poison? And the thing is, Ordo apparently told him as a child that no life can be saved without knowing your poison. And I like that. It's a nice little lesson for that kid, and I'm glad it sticks with him. And then we see this fairy that got kidnapped by Nasians about 2 chapters ago, and he is like, wow, darn it, he's actually in the way now. Well, that kind of sucks. No problem. Yo, Ordo, take care of your child. And Ordo pops up looking monstrous, and that's the end of the chapter. So let me get into my actual thoughts on the chapter. Thought 1. All right, intrigued. What is this power potion? And is it going to be used later, or is this just going to be the one used to save the forest? Because I like how Percival's sort of got an amp. He's filled with so much energy that he's literally just ran out and screamed. It was an interesting thing. Like, I wonder if this power amp is just going to be something that's used once, or if Nasians is in an emergency situation, he's like, here, Percival, take this, amp yourself real quick, and we're going to actually see it again, or if this is just a one-off device used for saving the gorge. Either way, I'm fine with it, but I'd be intrigued if Nasians does stick with the group, which I'm assuming he may do. He may just happen to be a great, like, either debuffer or an debuffer for other enemies, and an amp maker for his own party, especially if he keeps mixing different poisons and ways to figure out like how to enhance certain people while debuffing other people. I feel like Nasians could be a very interesting character type, one we don't necessarily get to see a lot, because like the only other person we see that actually amps people is like Merlin, and that's one of many characters in Seven Deadly Sins. So I'm actually really intrigued to see. Actually, no, Breath of Bless didn't amp people, it just mind controlled them. So actually, yeah, this is going to be super interesting to see. I hope Nasian sticks around just to see the more of his ability, and honestly, that's one of my favorite parts about Nasians right now, his drip and his abilities. Nasian's pulled up with some fire drip, some fire weapons, some fire abilities. I'm liking him a lot. And like Pelgard, I'm not saying you have competition, but like Nasian's currently #2 favorite character. Like, I'm not even gonna lie, he's above Percival, he's above Donnie, he's still above Sin. I'm like super intrigued to see more of Nasians. He's obviously easy second favorite right now, but Pelgard still holds the #1 spot. However, regardless of that, I'm intrigued about Ordo, because Ordo was a human. And he looks like he's on demon time. And what I mean by that is like he's transformed. But even then, is it really demon time? That's the thing. We lack details from his face. And honestly, I just don't recognize this kind of mutation. Like, that's what I'm wondering. Like, is this poison? Because you can see how his veins are like crawling out of his nails after this transmutation or whatever he is. And he has those two big glowing eyes. It looks like his head isn't like so much of a head anymore. It's like sunk into his body. So it kind of sort of looks like one of the demons. Hold on one second. Yeah, so he sort of looks like a copper demon that has like more veins popping out of him. I'm not going to lie. However, I'm more intrigued not just with his transformation and why he did transform, and also why he's in a lake, you know, monsters. And I'm assuming that's a lake. It may just be a hole in space-time, which would be even more interesting. But thing is, he kind of crawls out of a lake like a monster. I don't know, I'm intrigued. Also intrigued, who the heck is this fairy? Is this really a fairy? Because this is like honestly, this is the only like fairy size / fairy shaped villain or enemy that we've really seen. Because when you think about it, every other fairy that we've ever had that was a villain, aka basically just Helbram, he was like human size. Maybe not human size, but more human shape. This is like an actual fairy. I'm really intrigued about what his deal is and like why he wants to destroy the forest. If he is a fairy, because of course fairies are all about life and stuff like that. So I'm intrigued why he's evil. And if this even is a fairy, if this is something completely different, shaped like a fairy, that's even more interesting, and I can't wait to see what it is. And honestly, I'm just hyped to see what Ordo does next chapter. Chapter 10, I'm waiting for it, because if Nasian has to fight his dad or grandpa and figure out what he needs to do against him, that's going to be interesting to see. I can't wait. But then another thing I want to note, Nasians and Dolores are sister by title, not necessarily blood, or at least I'm assuming. But the interesting thing is, both of them show up out of nowhere. And the thing with Dolores is that we know reincarnation is sort of a thing in Seven Deadly Sins, and I don't think, this is just me, I don't think Diane and King or Matrona and her husband are the kind of people to let their daughter wander off like that. Especially at this young, impressionable age. I don't think they would have let their daughter just go off into the world like that. Like, Dolores supposedly has no parentage. She was just a wayward giant girl. So either she ran away from home and she's still their kid, or one of the two's kids, or she's just a reincarnation of the original Dolores. Because she does look very, very similar to the actual Dolores. She actually, at least as far as I can tell, doesn't have the build of Diane or King or Matrona or her husband. Like, she legit looks just like Dolores now that I'm looking at it with further reflection. So if this is Dolores' reincarnation, interesting. And I guess not. It wouldn't really explain. That's the weird thing. Giants have a slower growth rate, but we've never necessarily seen a baby giant. So I'm not sure if this would line up with whatever growth rates that they would have, that they would be this size. But I don't know. Now I'm wondering if this is Diane and King's kid and or Matrona and her husband's kid. What happened? Why is she a wayward giant girl? What happened? Why'd she leave? And two, I'm also wondering, why is she a nun? Because I initially thought she appeared as a nun, or like was a nun beforehand. But did like Ordo turn her into a nun? Did she become a nun to pray for Ordo's return or something like that? Like, this seems very interesting, because at least in the flashback, she's not depicted as a nun. She's just depicted as a girl in a dress. And the thing about that is that it just seems really, really strange. Like, I'm assuming this nun thing is conditional, and I want to know the conditions for it. Like, what happened? I need to know, because there's obviously a time gap between Ordo's disappearance and the current time period. I'm not saying anyone looks that much older. Like, Nasians looks about the same. In fact, he's wearing the same outfit just without the swaggy coat. So I'm wondering, why did Dolores become a nun? Why is she worshiping the goddesses now? If this is just a now thing and she just wasn't wearing her habit beforehand. And I also wonder what caused Ordo to disappear. Like, actually, where'd my man go, and why did he become a monster? Like, was he initially testing himself in order to become a monster, and that was just the end results of his thing, and in an attempt to save the people he grew to care about, he ended up crawling into that hole and trying to hide himself away, but this fairy is resummoning him or something like that? I'm very, very intrigued, because he was a human, at least supposedly. So if my man was a human and suddenly he's mutated into like a copper demon looking guy, I'm just intrigued where we're going with that. And then on top of this, Nasians was also just a baby that was abandoned in the gorge. So why? Like, were his parents somebody notable that just didn't want to have a kid? Was he like a child that wasn't wanted? Well, obviously he wasn't wanted. He was abandoned in the gorge. But you know what I mean? Like, was he a child that no one was able to raise? Like, what's Nasian's background? Like, both of these characters not having like clear established backgrounds and just showing up at the gorge one day, it makes their characters a lot more interesting, because it makes me want to ask a lot more questions about these characters. Well, questions that I'm assuming Dolores may have answers to, since she was a wayward giant girl. Like, she actually has some conscious memory of coming to the gorge. Meanwhile, Nasian just showed up as a baby. So I have no idea what his backstory is now. I'm assuming he doesn't either. So I'm intrigued to see where this is coming from. I'm intrigued to see where this is going. We're in a very interesting spot right now. I know I keep saying that for every one of these chapters, especially, and I'm going to be saying that for a lot of chapters since we're in such an early part in the series. But I'm very, very intrigued. I want to know why the forest was turning evil. Was it actually Ordo's disappearance, or does it have something to do with that dark looking fairy? I want to know more about the limits of Nasian's mixing powers. I want to know more about Dolores' backstory and why she switched from what looked like a regular looking giant girl to a nun, if she did switch, and that wasn't just like her nun habit not being fully on. I want to know what the deal is with this Echo Gorge and why it's so important, because it seems like this was very important to Ordo, only until Ordo disappeared. Like, there are so many questions being risen now, and I'm really, really excited. Like, I don't know, here's the thing, I was initially leaning so much towards, man, forget this, just get me to Leonis, let me see Meliodas, do it, please. But now I'm fine with this. I'm perfectly fine with learning all these new pieces of information about these new characters. I'm very, very excited, and I think that's a great thing. Nakaba, he's right. You didn't need to read Seven Deadly Sins to understand this one. It just helps a bit. And at this moment, I'm very intrigued in the world of Fortness of the Apocalypse and not so much the world of Seven Deadly Sins. And I think that's great. I think Nakaba's doing a fantastic job of establishing new characters that he wants me to care for and getting me to care for them and liking their backstory and liking their abilities. And I can't wait to see more. So, MVP of the chapter, obviously, it's my boy Nasians. He has the drip, he has the powers, he has the swagger, has the exaggerated swagger of a poison mixer. So I really like him a lot right now, and I can't wait to see how he's going to confront Ordo if Ordo does drop down from that hole. I also wonder what the hole is about. Is this made by the fairy? Is this a natural hole? What is Echo Gorge in its actuality? Was it a former Fairy King's forest that just fell apart? I'm wondering, where are all the giants? Because the fairies returned, but supposedly there were giants here too. So where did the giants go? I have questions. I'm very intrigued. And honestly, it's a great chapter. There's not necessarily, due to there being so many questions and not that many answers, I don't necessarily have that much more to talk about. But yeah, this is just a chapter that gets me hyped for the future. I like the little bit of backstory we got. Hopefully we get some more of it to explain what happened to Ordo, what happened to Dolores and why she's a lone giant girl, what happened to Nasians and why he was an abandoned baby. I feel like we aren't going to get that for a while though, so that's just going to be a part of his backstory to worry about and notice in the future. But yeah, this is a really solid chapter. I'd say like really, really good. Like honestly, pacing wise, everything, conclusion, opening, considering how much this chapter made me like Percival, especially considering how perceptive he reveals himself to be and how much he cares, honestly, and Nasian's backstory, all that great stuff, and even the more mystery behind Dolores. Actually, I really, really like this chapter. Like, I'm not gonna say it's a 10 out of 10, but it kind of is a 10 out of 10. Like, really, I don't see a problem with this chapter. It does a lot really, really good. So yeah, 10 out of 10 chapter. What do you guys think about the chapter? Please tell me in the comment section down below, because this seems like a really interesting chapter, and this once again just seems like a transitionary chapter. Like, this doesn't feel like a big, massive conclusion to something, despite it being the fixing of Echo Gorge, because of this whole new cliffhanger we have. So we're in the Echo Gorge arc, I suppose, and I'm very, very excited. What do you guys think about it? Please tell me in the comment section down below, and thank you guys so much for watching. Please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is That Guy with the Pencil, writing off.